Go.
Hey, we're live.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Thursday mornings, the 3rd of March, daily Q&A. We are talking about injury today, and this discussion comes off the back of a really insightful daily coaching call that we did yesterday, every Wednesday Wednesday here in Sydney, Australia, probably Tuesday for everyone in America and Europe, is when we get our resident physiotherapist, Phil White from ADPT Physio, on to talk all things injury management, injury rehab, and performance for training. And we had a really good discussion yesterday off the back of a question from one of our legendary tribe members who is experiencing a bit of discomfort in her shoulder. And we wanted to make it very clear the difference between an acute injury and a tendinopathy, which is something that can sort of come on slowly. We talk about overuse injuries like tendinopathy very often on the podcast, and it's very important that people don't assume. Now, let's just roll a clip from yesterday, Richard, and then we'll dive in and have a big discussion. Before we do, smash the like button if you're on YouTube. And remember, these questions generally come through from our Movement Mastermind Facebook group. And that's where we give a slightly higher level of coaching because people can post videos of themselves and we can interact with them at a higher level. This one actually was obviously through our coaching group, but absolutely dive over. There's a link in the description and join the Movement Mastermind. That's the next step up for you guys over on YouTube. And otherwise, smash that like button. Let's roll that clip and then we'll dive into it.
Okay.
And that's exactly where I want to start, because it is a very common.
It might not be tendinopathy of the rotator. We spoke about it is, well, first we want to see someone that can properly diagnose this pain, because it might not be tendinopathy of the rotator cuff specifically.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I want to start, because it is a very common thing to jump to conclusions with these things. And it's, we talk a lot about tendinopathies on the podcast, and and tendinopathies then become a bit of everyone thinks like, oh, it's not an acute injury, like I haven't done fallen over and hurt myself or dislocated my shoulder or something, so therefore all sort of insidious onset, therefore like not direct mechanism onset injuries are tendinopathy, and that's just not necessarily the case. So you really want to be careful with self-diagnosis, because just to make it really clear, like a tendinopathy management program would be very much you're training through pain. You're training to a level of pain to get enough adaptation of the tendon to cause a response. Whereas if it was like a rotator cuff minor tear, which is a possibility for insidious onset shoulder pain, you'd then want to be training not in pain. So it's just really important to not make these assumptions, and so you want to be working with someone to really diagnose it first, because it changes the management in a big way. So I guess that's probably the first place to start, is trying, like, if you have been told that's what it is, then that's cool. But you want to be really clear with that. Just sort of referring down to the elbow as well. So I'd be whenever you kind of have referring pain, you want to.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah. And of course that was the full discussion with Phil is available in our UMS coaching group. Anyone who wants to see the full discussion, join that group, join the tribe, and get yourself in there. But we want to dive in and really unpack that statement, because it is super important. That a lot of people, we find, self-diagnose themselves when they're injured, and forget how important it is to go and level up and work with someone who's an expert in that field, and I would go as far as even, and I've heard Phil say this a lot, not every physiotherapist or personal trainer or strength coach is going to be an expert in that field. You've got to work with someone who actually deals with athletes or people who are experiencing that type of injury, so that they're going to be able to give you the best sort of path forward and rehab program or method. So that what Phil says there, make that your first step, is absolutely important. And the reason is because it's so easy to make a mistake and assume that, okay, I've got a tendinopathy, and then continue training through it. And if you've got an acute tear that needs to, the tissues need to reattach, and you need to give it time to heal. The way that you would continue training there is to not aggravate that area. So, if you've got a shoulder issue with an acute tear, then I wouldn't be doing much upper body work for a couple of weeks, but you can absolutely still train lower body. And another really important thing is that you don't want to do any flexibility training on the shoulder whilst those tissues are healing together, because if you keep stretching them and pulling them apart, of course you're going to make the problem a lot worse. And so it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize this, and this is why a lot of people get very frustrated. On the flip side, with tendinopathy, you think that you've got an acute injury and you abstain from exercise. And I'm sure there's going to be people listening who can relate to this. You take a couple of weeks off thinking the best thing to do is to recover and give yourself some rest. And when you come back, the discomfort actually gets worse. With tendinopathy, the remodeling of the tissue gets worse and worse and worse. And things seem to get tighter and tighter and tighter, and it starts to just hurt all the time without even any stimulus, external stimulus, like when you go to the gym. And that becomes really frustrating. And the reason for that is because you actually should have kept training and you should have kept stimulating it. You often have to back it off a little bit and reduce the intensity to suit that compromised tissue. But you absolutely, what's worse than training too, what's almost as bad as training too hard with the tendinopathy is not training enough. And the two have a very, very similar result. You know all about training with tendinopathy, Richard. You've had a pretty nasty dose of forearm tendinopathy before.
Yeah, forearm tendinopathy, and I actually have had tendinopathy in my shoulder as well, bicep and supraspinatus. I haven't properly got it like diagnosed, but I had a quick chat to Phil about it, and he said, this is what it could be, and yeah, I mean, it's very hard for the average person to understand or know what they have, because like Phil said, there's so many things it could be, and if you address it the wrong way, it could potentially like make it worse. If you've got one of those acute injuries and you treat it as tendinopathy and you continue to train through it, you could make it worse. And same thing with if it's tendinopathy, if you don't train at all because you think it's an acute injury and you can just rest through it, and you come back a week or two later, you've essentially deconditioned a muscle now and made it weaker. And then the whole reason why it flared up in the first place was it was weak and it was struggling to cope with the demand that you were giving it. And then you go back into it thinking that you're all good, you've recovered, and then not only is the muscle still potentially flared up, but it could be even weaker. So it handles the demand even worse. So putting yourself in a worse situation. So it's a very tricky field to navigate, and that's why, yeah, like Phil said, you need to go to somebody with a degree in this stuff that knows it well, and can give you the proper management protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be super clear, we have a very strong belief that you should never, except for in the event of a bone fracture or immediately post surgery. Immediately post surgery, you always do what the surgeon suggests that you do, because there's liability issues there. And with a bone fracture, you generally really have to let the bone set. You can't be hobbling to the gym and mucking around, even if you're just trying to train the opposite end of the body. It's still quite dangerous. So there is a couple of circumstances where we do agree you abstain from exercise. But in most cases, in 95 to 98% of cases, we always suggest that motion is lotion and that you keep training for a variety of reasons. And that is because if you, let's say hypothetically, you hurt your shoulder, like our member is experiencing some discomfort in the shoulder. if you abstain from exercise altogether, then not only does the shoulder weaken because you're obviously not treating it or stimulating it. Remember, we lose very quickly our strength when we don't stimulate the muscles, but everything is lacking stimulus now. And so you're not only getting weaker in that compromised shoulder or joint, whatever it may be, you're now getting weaker everywhere. And so what it tends to happen is at some point you're going to return to your practice, whether it's sport or exercise, and you're going to be compromised everywhere now because you've gone backwards everywhere. Unfortunately, the one thing that tends to not take a backward step is the brain and the ego. And so the brain and the ego will turn up to the gym expecting to kick off where you left off 2 or 3 weeks prior. Unfortunately, the muscles, the ligaments, and the tendons have all regressed and are no longer at the. We talk about building your load capacity up. That's what training does. We progressively overload to increase our load capacity. Now your load capacity is smaller than lower than where it was when you left off to take time off for that injury. And you're now susceptible to injury in many more places than just that shoulder if you try to train at the level you were training before, which is what most of us do because we don't take this into consideration. So there is very, very important. People might be sitting there thinking, well, isn't it just safer to take time off if you're feeling injured or you're feeling like you're in pain? No, it's actually not. It's risky to just take time off, to assume that that's the best path of recovery. But it's also risky, of course, to assume that you've got a certain type of injury without getting a diagnosis. And I would urge that anyone, that's this is one of the great reasons why we have the Movement Mastermind free Facebook group. It is completely free to join. You get access to two of our most popular trainings, which is how we teach people to warm up and prepare for training, and also our 20-minute daily flexibility routine, which is also a strength routine for beginners. It's the types of movements that you're doing, you're going to develop strength and flexibility at the same time. It's a great introduction into what we do, and it's a routine that you can literally do every day, and it will be a great place to start. But above those two, you get access to us. You get an immense amount of external accountability. You get tribe accountability from the group. Everyone else who's in there, there's 4,500 people in there who are all striving for the same thing: improve strength, flexibility, and fitness, and some of them motivation, mindset, and things like that. Then you get access to alumni, people who are in our program. A lot of our program members, UMS members, are in that group. Most of them are, and they've all come through that group at some stage. And then finally, you get the expert accountability, which is us, Richard, myself, Rad, and Phil, who's in there every day. And he's also every Wednesday with us on the podcast and on the YouTube channel and Movement Mastermind channel. So it's a really, really, really good opportunity for everyone. I urge you to jump over there. It's nice to absorb the free content that we put out here on YouTube and on the podcast. But if you want to take that next step, jump over to the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group. There is a link in the description. And on that note, it is 9:15. We have to jump over and give a daily dose of coaching. If you liked this content, guys, please leave us a comment. Let us know so that we know to keep bringing it. And also smash that like button if you made it this far. Of course, my name is Yanni Baumeister. Richard is to my left, your right. We are Unity Gym and the Unify Movement System, where we turn driven people just like yourself to become strong, flexible, fit athletes. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Richie.
See ya.